So just yesterday, Ben Shapiro was on the Megyn Kelley show discussing whether Trump's VP, JD Vance, was a good choice. And Megyn Kelley seems to be playing devil's advocate here, that he is a good choice, and Ben Shapiro kind of disagrees. And they're going to get into it, and I side with Shapiro on this one. So let's see.
But was that the second mistake that Trump has made in this race was picking JD Vance? And I know you raised a similar question. And, without regard to whether people like JD or don't like JD or wanted JD or didn't want JD, that's a question worth exploring now that the race has changed and Biden's out and Kamala's in, because now it's going to be all about race. It's going to be all about gender. Every little comment, not just JD or Trump make about women or minorities, will be blown up.
Yeah, that is one thing to remember is that JD Vance was chosen before Biden backed out for running for a second term. So you have to keep in mind that Trump was thinking he was going to be running against Biden. So he got someone who was kind of more loyal. As Ben Shapiro was about to say, I think it was a bad choice.
As front page news items for days. But anything any Republican says, it was like some Republican talking head on CNN said something which they spent a week hitting on from the Kamala Harris team. So never mind if it comes from the vice president or the presidential nominee. So what do you think of that second question?
So, do I think that I think there's only one rule with vice presidential candidates, and that is they shouldn't be able to damage you. Meaning that the vice presidential candidates rarely have an upside. There's always this talk of like, you're going to pick a VP, the VP is going to win his home state. That really doesn't materialize very often at all. Nate Silver tried to quantify this. He suggested that maybe a vice presidential candidate in best case scenario might be worth like 0.4 of a percentage point in their home state. So I don't think that you can count on your VP to really add this massive upside to your candidacy. The one thing you can do is sort of damage control. I don't think that JD is like a massive downside guy. I just think of the pick of JD, and again, I think JD is brilliant, but I think that the pick of JD is more of a blown opportunity by Trump. So let's go back a couple of weeks to the RNC, and Trump is beating the hell out of Biden in the polls. Let's say that instead of going JD, he goes, say, Glenn Youngkin, right, who's the kind of the last alternative pick, and the one who I understand Susie Wiles, who's his campaign manager, was pushing for. So Youngkin is a relatively popular governor of a purple state, deeply inoffensive to pretty much everybody across the aisle. They would have attacked him, but he'd already been battle tested because he'd already run a very rough gubernatorial race in Virginia. And let's say that Trump had done two things. Let's say he picked JD, that he picked Youngkin rather, and let's say that his acceptance speech had gone 35 minutes and not 93. Let's say that he had told his story of the assassination attempt, said a couple more words about unity, and then stopped. I think there's a good shot the election's over no matter what, because the feeling of momentum that Trump is actually a unity candidate, bringing the party together, trying to open new spaces for the Republican Party, as opposed to doing with JD what I think everyone sort of agrees was a legacy pick, an attempt to turn Trump personally into a Trumpism, or to bring somebody on who's very personally loyal to Donald Trump. I don't see exactly what JD as a pick did. I said this at the time. I'm not sure what it did as a pick to add votes to the Trump coalition.
Yeah, so Ben makes a lot of good points here. And now they're going to leave out some of the demerits of JD Vance because they're very conservative. So they're not going to bring up the fact that JD Vance in the past called Trump, was referring to him as America's Hitler. They're not going to bring up, and I think if the Democrats bring this up, it could be a big problem for the Republicans. As someone who's not sure who they're going to vote for, I mean, I might not vote at all. I was leaning towards Trump, but I actually really don't like JD Vance as a pick. I think Ben Shapiro's right that he should have gone with more of a moderate. But JD Vance also said that he believed the people that accused Trump of sexual assault. He believed the accusers. So this is a problem for him. If they hit him with that, like if Kamala Harris says that in the debate, they go, hey, in 2016, 2017, Trump had several sexual assault not charges, but accusations, some of them going back decades. You said you believe those accusers. Do you still believe those accusers? And how's he going to wiggle his way out of that? He can't say, well, Trump had a good economy, therefore I don't believe the accusers anymore, which is what he's saying about his like Hitler comments. He's like, well, he ended up being a good president, so I guess he wasn't Hitler. It's like, still doesn't exactly make sense. But you can make the argument that he thought he was going to be a bad president. JD Vance thought Trump was going to be a bad president, and then he was a good president, so he changed his mind. But he can't really say that with sexual assault. Like, what's he going to say? You could be a good president and commit sexual assault. You could be a bad president and commit sexual assault. A lot of the Republicans would say that Bill Clinton has done that, yet he had a fairly good economy. So I really think and I feel like the Democrats are going to hit him with that. They're doing the Hitler stuff first, but yeah, Vance has a lot of really bad comments in the past. Not to mention the dumb things he said about Ukraine, saying he doesn't care. So, no one really cared about Mike Pence. He was just kind of milquetoast. He was very conservative, but it didn't really seem to bother anyone that much. I guess he was, really against gay marriage, but JD Vance is against gay marriage too. And what Shapiro brought up earlier is he was talking about Trump's RNC speech, which he said went on too long. It went on for like an hour and a half. He was saying he should have made it shorter.
Already does amazing with exactly the Rust Belt audiences that JD mostly appeals to in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. In fact, Trump has wildly outperformed JD in the one state where they both competed, in Ohio. And by the way, so did Mike DeWine, right? Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, who's way too moderate for most Republicans, that guy won his gubernatorial race by 20 in the same election cycle where JD won by 6. So,
by the way, that's the reason why Vivek Ramaswamy will not be the next senator from Ohio, because Mike DeWine is not going to pick him.
That's 100% right. So again, I think that the pick of JD is more a missed opportunity than it is like a massive downside pick. I also think that the beauty of Trump as a candidate is that there's nothing to attack him on because he's already been attacked on everything, right? As I've said about Trump for almost a decade at this point, he's a mud monster. So if you throw more mud at him, it's just more mud on the mud monster, and it's total. He's black socks. They never get dirty. The longer you wear them, the blacker they get, right? That's Donald Trump as a candidate. No matter what you do to Trump, it just looks like more Trump. The problem with bringing on a very fresh face who's never been battle tested in a gubernatorial race, for example, is that all this stuff is fresh. And JD is particularly fresh because all of us, I mean, you've said it, I've said, we've all said stuff over the course of our political careers that, don't sound great out of context. The thing is that most of us said it like 10 years ago. JD, because his trajectory was so short, he went from running a Senate race in 2021 to being the vice presidential candidate in 2024. That means your vetting period is super duper short. And so the time period when he went from, being on Tucker and saying kind of funny and inflammatory things to being the vice presidential candidate is incredibly short. Now, does that mean that it's not unfair? Of course, it's unbelievably unfair what they're doing to JD. They're deliberately misreading what he was saying. They're trying to now suggest that he is a weirdo. And again, I think that what that really is.
So I mostly agree with Ben, but once again, he's not going to bring up the actual stuff, the sexual assault, the Hitler comments, the Ukraine stuff, where he said JD Vance, right when they invaded Ukraine, he said he didn't care. It didn't matter to him at all. He doesn't care at all what happens. So basically, if Russia just goes over there and kills everyone in Ukraine, JD Vance doesn't care. Who cares? And there's like 9,000 American citizens that live in Ukraine too. So I'd say a pretty immoral take. But he's not going to bring that stuff up. He's bringing up some comments he made on Tucker Carlson's show that the left's hitting him for right now. But yeah, there's a lot of demerits to JD Vance. But he's right. JD Vance isn't quote-unquote battle-tested, and he comes off as dishonest. I mean, who goes from saying someone's Hitler to a few years saying he's awesome? So people will give you 10, 15, 20 years to change. But he thought he was Hitler and, when in his 30s. And apparently JD Vance's wife hated Trump as well. They're pulling up comments from her as well. So now JD Vance and his wife both like Trump. Yeah, Ben's right. His trajectory is not long enough.
This is a defensive maneuver in order to prevent people from recognizing the true weirdo in this race is Kamala Harris. She's a weird lady.
And the Democrats.
Yes, it's a weird party, and she's a weird lady. And again, I mean that just in the typical sense, like the weird cackling, the strange smiling, the weird hand motions, the word salad straight from Soup Plantation. Like all of it's weird. And then you juxtapose that with his family policy where he says basically it's good to have kids. Like that's supposed to be weird. She's with RuPaul's Drag Race doing Get Out the Vote. I mean, just on a raw level, that's a little weirder. It's like a little weird. So I think they're trying to sort of jujitsu this into JD is a weirdo. With all that put aside, do I think that Trump could have made a more politically savvy pick to win the election than JD? Yes, but I don't think that's what he was doing with JD.
I think there's a couple things on that pick. Yes, legacy pick, 100%. But I also think there's a real fear in the inner Trump circle that something could be done to Trump. That if the VP is too attractive to the establishment, to the...
So Megyn Kelley's going to play... I'm going to say devil's advocate because I almost want to feel like she's kind of more on the center right, though. With this election, she's definitely been running more Trumpian. Usually she doesn't endorse people. Like she didn't endorse any candidates in 2016 or 2020, but she's going hard for Trump. So maybe this is her being online. She's not in the mainstream media anymore. She used to work for Fox News and NBC. But now online, everyone tends to go towards populist left, populist right. That's why if I do one thing, I want to stand out as being slightly center right, because populist left, populist right is, I think, driving this nation crazy. But she's leaning more towards that, and she's about to come up with a conspiracy theory. Well, I don't say conspiracy theory, but a theory. Most people would say the reason Trump picked JD Vance is because he's kind of running as a populist. He did run as a populist in 2021, and that he kind of will be really loyal to Trump. Another demerit to JD, I think it's a demerit, I don't know if these two would, is JD Vance also said he would have overturned the election in 2020. So when Mike Pence certified the election on January 6th, JD Vance said he would not have certified the election. I think that plays bad for the general population, but for Trump, he loves that. He didn't want them to certify the election.
Intelligence community that they could try to take Trump out in some way,
There's
shape, or
from
form.
the Wall
Whether
Street
it's
Journal.
yeah,
there's
it could be an assassination or something less.
Right?
I don't know exactly what I'm implying or what they're implying, but I know there's a real fear if the second in command is too attractive to the establishment, it endangers Trump. You go.
I mean, that was reported. I think the Wall Street Journal reported that Tucker actually said that directly to Trump. That you need to have like a VP insurance policy, somebody who's not going to be so wonderful that you get shot at. The reason I think that that's a particularly stupid line, just generally speaking, is they literally tried to shoot him the week before and he didn't have a vice presidential candidate. So I don't think it's about who he was going to pick for his VP. I think that people who want him to die just kind of want him to die. And it's not as though, oh my God, I'm thinking this thing through. If I shoot Trump, oh my God, I'm going to get JD and that's going to be so much worse. I probably better preserve Trump's life. I don't know.
I'm glad that Ben Shapiro is kind of mocking this conspiracy theory, because it's hard to tell if Megyn Kelley's just, as I said before, playing devil's advocate, or she actually believes that. He should ask her that. He's not going to. He'll be like, okay, is this your position, or are you just saying? Of course, Tucker Carlson's going to say that. Tucker Carlson's populist right, so he wants someone who's populist right. And Tucker's, I mean, I'll be doing more videos on him. I already did some, but I mean, he's kind of grifting too. He spent his entire career in the mainstream media. Then he gets tossed out of the mainstream media, and then all of a sudden decides the mainstream media sucks. Yeah, how convenient. Once you get tossed out of there, fired from Fox News, now the mainstream media is the worst thing ever. Yeah, we know. So you have to have a super, super crazy person as your VP. This is their theory, Tucker's theory. Because if they try to, and even I don't like the way Ben's saying they. I mean, we know it was, so far it's only one shooter, and there's no connection towards like some deeper conspiracy, the CIA or something. So I don't even think he should say they. But there already was someone who tried to assassinate Trump unsuccessfully. Seems like we're not even sure why he did that. But yeah, the idea that so by that logic, he should probably choose Marjorie Taylor Greene as his VP, because the establishment, quote unquote, really hates Marjorie Taylor Greene. But Ben's gonna make the point: don't you want to win elections? I mean, is your idea just choose the craziest person that the mainstream hates? That also means, by the way, that the people might hate them as well. That's the problem. If the mainstream hates the person, but then you also have to win an election, how exactly does that work? Since most people are not Tucker, are not on populist right. I mean, Tucker Carlson just the other day, I might make a video on this, just said that Victoria Nuland, Secretary of State in America in 2014, started the war in Ukraine. I mean, that's the type of genius stuff Tucker Carlson says. So I think the average person thinks Victoria Nuland probably did not start the war in Ukraine. It was most likely Russia.
Know that there's any assassin who thinks that way.
Well, you heard Don Jr. Don Jr. explicitly said, when people were saying, pick Nikki Haley, he said that he'll be impeached in 2 seconds. In 2 seconds if he wins, if she's his number 2. And I take that point. I think that's part of the point they're making.
I mean, the only reason that I disagree with that is they would impeach him in 2 seconds if Mike Pence were his vice president. Because they did, twice. Like, again, I think that we're ignoring the control. The control here is that they will impeach him no matter what. I mean, are we pretending?
You don't think there's a greater temptation if you've got like a Haley or a Youngkin who they love? They don't love, but they loved Haley. And they would tolerate Youngkin more than, a MAGA type like JD.
I think it's an incremental temptation. Let's put it this way. They 99% want to impeach Donald Trump no matter what. And now they're like 99.4%, depending on who exactly is the vice president. I don't think that you select the vice president on the basis that they might be slightly nicer to you if you pick somebody who is slightly worse for them as vice president. Again, like if you're Trump and you're just gaming out how to win, like my main focus for Trump is how do you win, right? I'm a donor to his campaign. I want him to win. Like all of this is like assuming he wins. How about we get to like the part where he wins? And then we worry about what comes next. I would like him to win.
But don't you think, Ben,
That's
you and I,
priority.
how many times were we on the air together in 15, 16, right? Back when I was at Fox. they are going to do, they would have done to a Youngkin, anybody. You name a Rubio, even a Nikki Haley, they would have done to them exactly what they're doing to JD.
I agree.
They take whatever they can, and they really wanted us to believe that Mitt Romney was a sexist pig because of binders full of women. You know, we watched them do that.
So this is why I think this is probably not Megyn Kelly's position, because now she's kind of making the alternative argument that, well, you probably don't want to choose a crazier VP because actually they would do that to anyone. She's going to say they did it to Mitt Romney and he wasn't very offensive. So maybe she is doing devil's advocate, because now she's making kind of the alternative argument that, you know, you should. She doesn't say this, Ben does, but you should just choose the best VP that you think could win. That makes the most sense, rather than playing some. That's 12D chess to choose a more populist candidate who might be more unpopular with general public. You might not win, but they might not. They'd be less incentivized to impeach you. But you have to win first.